Good afternoon, notaries. Thanks for being here. I know we have a few more people logging in. And just a reminder that we do record most of these sessions. So if you have to jump off or you come on a little bit late, this will be available in the members area or for other members in your office, just to keep that in mind. So thank you to Mary Villani and Ron Usher for being here today. Mary is Senior Manager of Cash Management at the Lower Mainland North Commercial Banking Center for TD Bank. So we appreciate you taking the time to share some information with us here today. I will pass it over to Ron Usher, who I feel needs no introduction, and he'll get us started for the first 10 minutes of this session. Over to you, Ron.
Yeah, thank you, Trista, and welcome, Mary, to Notary Land. We're pleased to have you joining us. I know probably the vast majority of our members have TD accounts, so thank you for coming. And I think your general expertise in this whole area and your ability to explain some of the arcane terminology that is a mystery to most of us will be really welcome. I think my role here today is put this in a bit of context for everyone and point you to the key documents you need to be familiar with as a notary when we're getting into doing these kind of online or electronic transfers. And by this we mean in a very general way, the exchange of money not using the check we've all become so used to. Our rules were amended in August of 2020, really in response to pandemic and issues. This has been, of course, a long time in coming and really is unrelated to pandemic difficulties, but this got very much highlighted during that time. In any event, your board of directors of the society made these changes in August of 2020. You can find the text of these, of course, in the rules. It's on the website. But what I've just excerpted here is this particular bit and these rules that were added. And just to highlight, the intent of these was to be permissive, to allow you to do it. And I know just from my experience that some of you have enthusiastically adopted electronic transfers just because it's easier, or maybe, I know one of our members, the only bank in town, closed down. So it was just very difficult. Others, of course, have been very resistant and concerned about the extra effort, and cost, and trouble that it might take. I was reminded of this yesterday, a week ago. I had the tragedy in Victoria at the bank there, and a person I know, they're doing their bank run at the bank next door to the bank that was robbed. And it was a pretty traumatic experience for the firm's runner, who would normally be going and doing the banking. So that, needless to say, that firm has gotten very convinced that maybe electronic transfers are a good idea. Anyway, obviously a very exceptional circumstance. Well, I'm going to take a bit of a highlight at the rule and what you can and what it's intended to enable you to do. And I think the first section is critical, and it just says, well, who can you do this with? And we've got our A through G list, a regulated financial institution. So note that this is not Bob's Never Registered Private Mortgage Co. If you can't find the person on they're a bank or credit union or a mortgage lender that's listed on the BCFSA site, they are not what we would call a regulated financial institution. Clearly, your client, you can do these transfers from clients, other lawyers. Note it says a Canadian lawyer, not an American lawyer. And another BC notary, not a notary in Saskatchewan, who's not a regulated person. Obviously, Quebec notaries, which are regulated like you are. BC real estate firms, brokerages, and of course, government agencies. So that's the complete list. Note that this does not say the dubious Bank of Hanoi. Or Bob's Kremlin credit union. That's no. Okay, so just there, this is not limited, but of course this list probably represents the vast majority of people you would send money to or get money from. The sub-rules 2.2 and 3 are to do with sending and receiving, and they require, subject to some exceptions to that listed later, that you send money from between two different institutions. In other words, you would inquire if you're at TD, you say, can I send things to your Royal account? And there's a reason for this. And again, this is something your board will take a look at and subject to advice from the banks, because interbank payments go through the Payments Association clearing facility. They pick up a guarantee from the Bank of Canada and cannot be recalled. Well, the payment rules are very clear. You can see all the payment rules, for example, on the Payments Canada website. We'll need to look at this. That most of the banks and perhaps TD as well say, look, even though if a transaction is on us, in other words, it will not go through the central payments agency, that they do honor the payments rules about clearing, confirmation, etc. So we're certainly happy to look at this rule, but there are exceptions to this requirement that you go between two different banks, and they're listed in 4. And there's 3 exceptions, and they are ors. The language I've added the or there. You only need to meet one of these rules. That for example, both of you only have an account that's at the same bank, or it's a transfer subject to the standard undertakings regard to electronic transfer, and we'll look at that. And that will apply to most of your, for example, sending net sale proceeds from a buyer side to the vendor side, and then excess funds being transferred to a client. I think that 5 is pretty clear. I think when you're doing funds, you must use a double process. Most of the banks, and Mary will touch on this, is each of the banks and lending institutions have their own interface and for example, to approve transfers. I think essentially all of them use double, and if you're a double authentic, if you're a sole practitioner notary, we run into this, you need to essentially have kind of 2 identities. So this is intended that your staff can prepare all the thing, but it does require the notary to authenticate the process. So this doesn't, we have a number of sole practitioners doing this, and we've certainly approved that. You've got to fully document it, and this is where you're going to get out paper and you're going to capture records that say exactly what's happened. And so those can, of course, be available to the society practice inspectors and auditors. Makes it clear you can only 7 makes it clear you can only do this to people on title. This is not we use when you've got more complicated payouts to do. Please, we've had at least one situation where one of our members got misdirected proceeds. Again, you've heard our many fraud warnings about misdirection. And so this is a problem. I think the Law Society's also been dealing with misdirection. And I think the last kind of catch-all is if there's a special circumstance where you need to do it that somehow your concern violates this rule, you can get approval from the society for that. And you can talk to Eric, John, or if necessarily one of the PAL advisors, if there's something that you need to do but violates this rule. Now, to make sense of this, and I've only have a couple of minutes left here, is I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to load the next thing you need to know, which is the standard transaction undertakings. So what's on here now, you should be seeing on your screen, these noted, it said it in our rules, it referred to the undertakings. And so what you need to know is in April, also in 2020, the standard undertakings were amended to allow for electronic transfer. So if you haven't got this, send a note to PAL and we can send it to you. But here's the key. And one of the most important things in this is both sides have to agree to it. You cannot unilaterally impose an electronic transfer, and similarly, somebody can't force one on you. So, and there's rules here about you, and you're providing copies of confirmation. So if you're going to make sense of this, you got to understand our rule. You got to understand the revised standard undertakings for electronic transactions. And the third thing, which I won't show you, but your lawyer should do, is the Law Society, the rules that govern lawyers' use of this, because the undertakings refer to the Law Society rules. So to really make this work, particularly if you're dealing with a lawyer on the other side, you need to know our rule, the special wording of the undertakings and what it really is the agreement agreed to by your parties. And then lastly, you might want to, it's always useful to understand the rules that apply to the lawyer side. So if anybody wants these, I can provide all 3 of these documents. Just send a note to PAL We'll post them on the somewhere we can try and get these to everybody. I'm sure the Notary Society or the Notary Association could do this. So that's the key. And now we're going to get to the good stuff. I see it's 12:10. I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Mary. Thank you.
Ron, did you want to just answer a quick question first, if you don't mind, just because it relates?
Absolutely.
It was just a question saying, sorry, what was the name of the website that you referred to check if a bank qualifies as a regulated financial institution?
Oh, yeah. Well, the banks do it, but somebody else. So, for example, Antrim Mortgage. Okay, you're going to go to BCFSA, the BC Financial Services Authority. They're the regulator of credit unions, mortgage brokers, and realtors. You go to the mortgage site there, and you can say, "Oh yes, I see that Antrim Mortgage shows up on the BC Financial Service Authority website." And that's the place where you can, this is also, for example, where it's very useful for notaries, where you can confirm if someone's a private lender or not. This often comes up because you'd have to, as you know, you have to have a discharge in hand for private lenders. Well, you go to BCSFA. If they're listed there, you don't have to do the mortgage discharge in hand process.
Okay, super. Thanks. And sorry, and it was over to Mary.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen here, hopefully. Okay, so do you have a screen that says TD Cash Management Services?
Yeah,
Looks good, Mary.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day today. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm particularly right now sitting on the unceded territories of the Coquitlam First Nations out here in Coquitlam, British Columbia. And I'm also speaking to you today as someone who has been in the finance industry for over 30 years, and please don't do the math on my face. I'm not here to push TD upon you, TD Bank. Basically, everything I share today really does relate to any credit union or bank that you currently deal with. And so we might use different terms, our platforms might look slightly different, but essentially it's pretty much the same. And hopefully that's not a spoiler alert for anybody that out there. So now I'm just going to go to my next slide. Oh, of course it's not wanting to go to the next slide. Oh dear, that's interesting. It was working just a minute ago and now it won't let me go to the next. That's technology for you. Okay, here we go. Or maybe. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So basically, cash management services are anything that helps you to send money in and out of your business, especially electronically. And why are those services important to you? It's because it helps you to be more efficient, more cost-effective. It allows you to have better reporting and additional security. Basically, they're all the electronic services that you can access to send payments. So one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly is the 4 types of cash management products that your bank or credit union probably offer that are their most popular. And so the first is electronic funds transfer debit service. That's how you might pull money into your organization or your firm. Some people will do it for rental payments or subscriptions, regular payments. All you need is the account number of the individual that you're going to debit, plus they need to sign a pre-authorized debit form that needs to be kept on hand. The wire payment service, which we're going to cover today in quite a bit of detail. Electronic funds transfer credit service, which is how you would pay others just by having their account number, their bank number, and their transit number. And then remote deposit capture scanners, which are becoming more and more popular. What they allow you to do is to deposit checks into your account at your financial institution without a hold. The funds are usually in your account within a couple of hours. and excellent record keeping. You scan the checks, you have copies of them ongoing, and then you destroy the physical check after about 15 days. So I mentioned briefly that there's some cost savings from using your cash management services. You'll be more efficient. You'll have better control over your cash flow. It does save you time. It gives you a lot of security and a lot of peace of mind. And we break the categories down into how you make payments, your payables, how you receive payments, and the information that you can obtain. And so as you can see there on the left, what we're really talking about today are the different methods in which you can make payments online and electronically. So there we've got payments and transfer service. That would be if you were transferring funds between your own account, your own business account, if you were paying a bill, say to BC Hydro or Shaw or TELUS. And also what you can do is you can set up a payment where you can do a transfer only or a credit only, transfer into a third party's account. And so we have a lot of clients that have other lawyers' accounts set up on this service so that they can do a real-time transfer at a very low cost. You would just need to make sure that you're doing those transfers that are allowed by your overseeing body, of course. Electronic funds transfer credit, that's usually what clients will use for payroll or for vendor payments. Wire payment services. Wire payment services are usually for your larger amounts. They can be sent across the border, so they can go into the US, they can go internationally, and they can be for pretty much any dollar figure that's allowed by your particular restrictions that you've set up. So when you set up wire payment services with your financial institution, you'll be able to set it up so that you can only send a certain dollar figure. And usually you'll have dual authentication, which means, especially in your cases, you would have dual authentication, which means you have to have two people involved in the transaction. And then, of course, tax payment and filing. So all financial institutions in Canada have access to help you enroll in tax payment and filing. It's a third-party site run by, set up by CRA and run by TELUS. Yeah, I've covered those a little bit. And if you are dealing with your financial institution and you're going into the branch to see someone and you don't get the sense that they have the expertise or the knowledge that you need, by all means, speak to your branch manager. You might not be dealing with the expert that you need to be dealing with, and they will be able to direct you to the team that you need. So in TD's world, we've got our retail branch banking experts, great for personal clients. And then we've got small business advisors, which are usually within the branch. They are business experts, usually deal with clients that have under $5 million. And then we've got our commercial bankers, and that's the realm that I work in. You have a team of people that work locally with you when you're in commercial banking. So it is more expensive than, say, a small business relationship. So when you're dealing with your financial institution, just make sure that you're getting the information and the expertise that you want and that you need. And if you're not, be your own advocate. So I mentioned briefly about, when somebody would use EFT, electronic funds transfer, and these terms all get mushed together, I find. And each one actually means something very specific. And so each institution will generally use the same terms. But if you're ever confused or wanting to have an understanding or a breakdown, I do have something that I'm going to be sharing later for distribution that you could use to sort of get an idea of, okay, when do I use this particular payment method? But basically EFT are generally used for, your payroll, your vendor payments, Wire payment services are used for much larger payments. They're international. And one of the things about wire payment services, and Ron and I actually had a situation yesterday, and we had a chance to talk about this. When you send a wire payment, the financial institution that is receiving that payment does need to verify that the payee or the beneficiary name on that wire is exactly the same as the registration on the account to which it's being deposited. And if it is off in any way, that wire payment is going to be rejected. And, you know, we talk a lot about wire payments and how we want to give you the opportunity to use wire payments for conveyancing and payouts and things. But I really liked what Ron had to say, because he said, he used the word permissive. And I don't ever want any of you to feel that you can't do your banking the way you want to do your banking. What we're trying to do here is provide you with options and to help you to feel comfortable with those options and to explore what's available to you. If you have a payout that's, you know, the closing's today, you probably aren't going to want to send a wire, because you're going to want that stamp that tells you that those funds have gone into that account, and that's okay. So really, it's more about giving you options. So a few things we wanted to talk about today, other than wires, with how to reduce fraud. We are experiencing more and more fraud, and what we are seeing is that fraudsters have learned that they can get a lot more money from a business client, from a professional, than they can from our personal clients. And so businesses and municipalities and large corporations, public corporations, are really being targeted by fraudsters. So one of the main ways in which we still see fraud is through check fraud. And so we always recommend that you try to get away from writing checks and use electronic forms of payment. Check your accounts daily to see the activity that's going through, to make sure that it's expected activity. Use high quality check stock. So high quality check stock will have different things on it, like watermarks, that'll make it a bit more difficult to replicate. Choose envelopes that make checks hard to detect while in transit. So those window envelope checks are terrible. Try not to use those if you can. Securely store checks and shred canceled checks and old stock. I've been to clients' offices where I've seen a box of their checks sitting on the floor in their client area. So don't do that. And don't let your clients do that either. And use automated check fraud detection services like Check Fraud Protection. And if you're ever wondering what Check Fraud Protection is, just check with your financial institution and they can explain it, or I can explain it. And ensure dual control over managing your check stock. So that's really important. And I think I mentioned it in a little bit, that don't have the same person that's writing the check checking your check ledgers. My father's firm had a $500,000 loss. Fortunately, it was after he had left, but it was because their accountant, who they all adored and trusted, was the only one signing the checks and the only one checking the account. So I speak from experience when I say don't do that. So business email compromise, that's another huge concern that we see. And it's one of the reasons actually why we moved to dual authentication back in 2019 for all of our clients for wire payment services and electronic funds transfer. And the reason why we did that was because we were seeing that fraudsters were sending emails pretending to be the CEO of a company and saying to a junior employee, you know, change my bank account information, I've changed my account, or they've been receiving, and we still get this a lot, where our clients will receive emails from who they think is their client saying, oh, I've changed my account number, can you send the wire to this new account number? So just remember that email is not a secure mode of communication. Treat any changes to account or banking information as red flags that require additional due diligence. And the reason why I say that is because nobody likes to change their account. We all know it's painful. We try, as bankers, we try to make it less painful, but it is kind of painful. So people aren't just going to willy-nilly change their account number. So that should be a red flag that goes up. Validate payment instructions or changes, either face-to-face or by phone. So when you're getting that wire instruction letter from a law firm, accept it, but before you act upon it, call that law firm at the number that you've personally looked up and call and speak to them to verify that the information is what they had sent. Implement policies and internal controls in every of your business that handles payments. And we do have a little fraud webinar, and I could share the deck with you if you wanted it, but it does, and we've got a brochure that tells you how to implement some policies in your business. I always recommend quarterly fraud seminars or webinars in your business. Maybe serve food and make it a social thing, but also have a component to talk about what's happening currently with regards to fraud. And empower your employees to question payment instructions. It's okay to ask the questions. Malware. Okay, so you've probably experienced some issues with malware, maybe in your personal life or your work life, or you know someone that has had a malware issue. I was on a board where our police department actually experienced malware and shut the place down for a couple of days. It was very challenging. And so the important thing here to know is to make sure your employees understand how to safeguard their credentials and potential fraud scenarios. Monitor accounts and audit logs daily. And when I say audit logs, when you have electronic banking, like a commercial banking platform with your financial institution, they will give you access to what's called an audit log. And you'll be able to see exactly who is logging into your online banking, what they did when they were logged in, how long they were in there. And so we do recommend that you review those, maybe not daily, but definitely weekly. Take advantage of all security features that you've got available on your account or banking platform. And if you don't know what those are, speak to your banker, get them to do a training session with you. And if you need a refresher maybe once a year, don't feel badly asking your banker for that. Ensure you have the latest antivirus and anti-spyware, firewalls, and up-to-date browsers, and be alert to any unusual screens, pop-ups, or error messages. We talked about monitoring your accounts, taking advantage of security features. Provide your employees with separate logins. Don't all use the same email address or the same login. Don't all use the same bank card to log into banking. Educate your employees on awareness and consequences. So making sure they know not to just click on a link. Make sure that they know not to browse too many junk websites and not to click on pictures, that kind of thing. And have different accounts for different functions. This isn't always going to be practical for every client, but we do have clients that'll set it up so that, you know, their payments come out of one account, their deposits go into another account. And then, of course, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, segregation of duties, which I think is also really important. So the top 5 prevention tips: careful where you click. Be careful on clicking links. Every time I send a client a link now, I feel guilty because they're going to have to take a look at the link by right-clicking on it and checking to make sure that it looks like a legitimate source. Regularly monitor your bank account and your credit cards. That one's so important. Take advantage of security features. Use your latest software and browser updates, And then also consider business continuity or cyber insurance. I'm not an insurance salesperson, but it is something for you to seriously consider. And that's it for me.
Thanks very much, Mary. And there's Trista back as well. Just wanted to check and see if any of our members had any questions for either Mary or Ron. And I think, Mary, you spoke about a number of products there, which I thought was interesting, in particular, the mechanism around, check deposits and essentially the scanning tool. So is the hardware actually proprietary to TD in this case, but you're saying other banks have similar products?
Yes, actually, I call ours a toaster. It's about the size of a toaster. It plugs into your computer via a USB, but we can accept other scanners. I have a whole list of the scanners that we can accept. We don't charge clients for the scanner. However, if they, after 90 days, if they decide to keep it, they need to maintain the service for 2 years. And I think that's how we probably recoup our expenses for that scanner. But every financial institution has their own, but you can use, generally, I should say, I know TD allows other scanners. I shouldn't speak broadly for every financial institution, but I'd be very surprised if you had an appropriate scanner and your institution wouldn't allow you to use it.
Okay, thanks. Trista, I'll turn it to you for the Q&A.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Ron. So we've got a few questions coming in now. The first one here, where do we find the audit log on the TD website?
Super. So I'm guessing that you already have Web Business Banking, the commercial banking platform. And so what you would do is when you log in to Web Business Banking, on the left-hand side, you're already going to be in administration. It takes you right to administration when you first log in. And on the left-hand side, it'll say audit log.
Perfect.
And if you can't find it, just call me later or send me an email.
Thank you. Our next one here, so in relation to paying sale proceeds to a seller on a title, can you pay the proceeds to one seller only if the other consents?
Yeah, of course, that's a question, Ron, here. That's, of course, a question beyond what we're talking about here in terms of electronic payments. But generally, in fact, no. I mean, this has been clearly there is no rule per se in a society about that, but we've faced claims on this part before, because later on the other person says, how come I didn't get any money? And what you think about what's going on here is that the clients want you to do their banking for them, okay? And that's not the purpose of your trust account. We're not a bank. We'll let Mary sort that out. We'll give the parties individual checks or check it together to a joint account. But when someone wants you to do something that's effectively some banking, it's really good to say no. So that's whether it's an electronic transfer or a check, the same cautionary tale applies. And I'll just note one thing. The scanners we're talking about here are scanners that are optimized for checks. These aren't the scanners that you would use for your paper documents. So all of you, everyone's gotten pretty good at scanning generally, but these are specialized ones that are meant for checks. You can feed them. And I know the feedback I've had from some notary firms that have adopted these, trust me, it's a lot easier than waiting in the lineup at the bank. Yeah, and they have, particularly during COVID, this became an issue. But generally, the idea that you can just drop 5 checks in this thing and push scan, get a log, get a confirmation right away, people have found that to be very, very useful. Again, not for everyone. If the bank is right next door to you, why not walk over and say hi to your friends there? But if you're finding your staff spending a lot of time waiting at lines at banks 30 minutes away from your office, it's something to really think about.
Thanks, Ron. We had some agreement comments coming in that it is definitely faster. So thank you. Next question here, how notaries are managing the 2-hour wire transfer time? When we act for the buyer, how do you ensure funds arrive in the seller's notary account in a timely fashion, i.e. before the end of the day at the latest?
Mary, you got some thoughts on that, I know.
Yeah, So when you're sending a wire within your financial institution, like TD to TD or RBC to RBC, usually those funds will be in the account within a couple of hours. If you send that wire early in the morning and it's going to another financial institution within Canada, it truly is often there within a few hours, same day. And if it's going into the US, it's usually next day or about 48 hours. And then internationally, it can be 3 to 5 days. The challenge with wires is if you don't have it right, it's going to get rejected. And it takes time for it to be put back into your account. And so if you had something that was urgent, closing today, I would say there's nothing wrong with going into the branch and getting that deposit made. That might not be a popular thing for me to say, but if I were in your shoes, I think I would be occasionally a little bit nervous. And I said to Ron yesterday, I said, we'll go for months without any issues to do with wires. It'll be smooth and I'll think, this is fantastic. This is great for clients. And then you'll have a day like yesterday where the receiving financial institution sent the wire to the wrong place, which wasn't great, but we got it fixed same day. But still, I did feel badly for my client because they were, sort of on tenterhooks. And so there are going to be those times where something might happen. The payee name is wrong. So Ron had a situation yesterday where the payee name was incorrect. And so the receiving financial institution had to reject it. So unfortunately, we were able to figure that out because we were the receiving financial institution. And then of course, if you're sending it and the receiving bank is having some issues with anti-money laundering questions or what have you, that can be an issue as well. So.
Yep. Thanks, Mary. In fact, just to update, a bit more information on the one that went wrong yesterday. It was a problem with a law firm sending money to a notary. When the law firm went to the staffers, went to the bank and did the wire, or even online, they made an error in the bank branch number. And so they had all the correct information about the notary firm, but because the branch number was incorrect, it went to a branch in Ontario rather to the branch of the notary. And what's really interesting, and this is just as true for checks, is pretty clear that everybody wasn't paying attention. The law firm didn't look at it and say, well, why? When they typed it in and it shows the account in Ontario, that made no sense. And at the bank, when the bank staff person who approved this, they see, okay, it's Bob Notary in BC, but somehow the bank account is in some town I'd never heard of in Ontario. Again, it's the same problem. Clearly a substantial failure to read. I take it, Mary, that normal bank security says, I'm going to look at this and say, is the name of the account holder, does it match the account? And of course, there's no way that whoever account it was in Ontario was absolutely not the trust account of a British Columbia notary firm. So typically when something goes wrong, it requires quite a bit of error. That somebody makes a typo isn't shocking. What is more shocking is, and of course, I point out that our rules and the Law Society rules require the production and the creation of that printed record of what happened. And again, it's just people just weren't unfortunately paying attention. Mistakes will happen, and as thanks to Mary's assistance, the funds that were in the notary's account this morning, and peace and happiness broke out. But there was some nervousness. And so there is no magic to electronic transfers. The same care, the same way you're going to be careful what courier envelope you put the check into, the same way you're going to double check account numbers if you're doing a direct deposit. So it's not that it isn't the case that these things are inherently more or less risky than the kind of risks. And we've had lots of trouble with checks lately. People losing checks And of course, it's essentially impossible to put a reliable hold on a check. There is no guaranteed stop payment mechanism in the Canadian payment system. The banks are pretty good about it, but there's absolutely no assurance that a bank will not cash a stale dated check, for example. So in those ways, an EFT is a more secure transaction. A number of our firms have been plagued lately with clients claiming to have lost net sale proceeds checks. And it's a real problem. You're sitting with a couple many $100,000 check floating around out there, and you have no idea where it is, what happened to it. That's a worse problem than dealing with an EFT.
I do have one comment, actually. When you are going to be sending a wire payment, you can ask the beneficiary to go to their financial institution and get a form that will tell you exactly what the SWIFT code is, the address of the beneficiary bank, the transit number and the bank number and the account number, all the information you're going to need. We have them here that we give to our clients when they want to receive wire payment information so that they can supply it to whoever is paying them. And I would strongly recommend that. Don't take the onus all onto yourself. Get your clients to take some ownership. That document can be sent to them electronically, probably by their financial institution. They can forward it through to you. And then you have they have the comfort of knowing that you're going to send the money to the right place. And you have the comfort of knowing that you're going to send it to the right place. And you're also not having to run around like they were yesterday trying to figure out, where this money happened to be. So,
oh, but Mary, your point's really great. And I would recommend this to all of our members. Next time you're at the bank, get that information for your own trust account. And then don't forget the protocol is to say the law firm is supposed to get your consent to send you wire. You say, yes, I consent to do it. And you send them that SWIFT that account information. This is much more information that's on your check. And it means you don't have to decode those squiggles at the bottom of your checks to try and figure out what exactly it is. And so if you have on hand the information Mary's talking about for your trust account, then when you get a request, someone says, I'm going to send you money, you've got a very precise and your authorization to them. Yes, I consent to receiving money from you if you send it to this account, see attached. And I think, for example, imagine the situation yesterday, if the law firm had gone to the bank holding in hand that information, that it probably would have reduced the likelihood that somebody made a typo, because they would have seen that the branch in question was not backwoods Ontario, but Main Street, British Columbia.
Well, great.
Thanks.
No, thanks very much, Ron and Mary and Trista. I'll turn it over to you to wrap things up.
Okay, great. Mary, I just had one more question, but it looks maybe more like a comment. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's just about the fee that TD charges. So I imagine that's a $17.
I think that's just for information for our members to note what the cost would be like, but yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so when a wire comes into your financial institution, there's usually an incoming wire fee. And for TD Bank, it's $17.50 for sure.
Perfect. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for the valuable information and for all your insight, Ron. We appreciate you both taking the time over your lunch hour here to do this. And thanks to our members for attending. Our next Lunch and Learn is 2 weeks from now, July 20th. Chad will be facilitating. That's BCNA and the Mercer Employee Benefits Program. So there'll be another email reminder out about that. And any questions, you can always email or call me. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Mary. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice. Bye now.
Bye.